Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Explore Everything. Today, we step inside the walls of HMP Belmarsh, Britain's toughest prison. A place where the most dangerous criminals, ruthless terrorists, and high-profile inmates are locked away from the world. From bomb plotters to killers who shook the nation, this is no ordinary prison. This is Britain's fortress of fear, where even time itself feels like a sentence. When the gates of HMP Belmarsh first opened in 1991, few could have imagined the level of power, secrecy, and fear that would soon be contained within its gray concrete walls. This was not just another prison. It was a response to an era of change, conflict, and rising threats that tested the very heart of Britain's justice system. When the gates of HMP Belmarsh first opened in 1991, few could have imagined the level of power, secrecy, and fear that would soon be contained within its gray concrete walls. This was not just another prison. It was a response to an era of change, conflict, and rising threats that tested the very heart of Britain's justice system. The late 1980s and early 1990s were turbulent years for the United Kingdom. London faced increasing threats from terrorism, particularly the IRA bombings, and organized crime networks were expanding their reach like never before. The country needed a place that could securely contain the uncontainable, the kind of men whose influence extended far beyond prison bars, whose presence could incite violence, chaos, or even political scandal. That place became HMP Belmarsh. Built on the windswept grounds of Thamesmead in southeast London, Belmarsh was designed to be a fortress, both physically and psychologically. The very architecture reflects this intent. High concrete walls, watchtowers, and a maze of security systems were not only meant to keep prisoners in but to send a message to the outside world: no one escapes Belmarsh. The Ministry of Justice described it as a Category A facility, the highest level of prison security in the United Kingdom. Category A prisoners are defined as those whose escape would be highly dangerous to the public, the police, or the security of the state. In other words, Belmarsh was built to house Britain's nightmares. From the very beginning, Belmarsh was unlike any other prison in Britain. Where most prisons were designed with reform in mind, Belmarsh was built with containment as its core philosophy. Every inch of it was planned to suppress power, control behavior, and prevent communication with the outside world. Even its geographical position was strategic, close enough to central London to access the courts and security services quickly, yet isolated enough to function as a self-contained citadel of authority. The prison officially opened in April 1991 and could hold over 900 inmates. It was immediately recognized as one of the most secure facilities in Europe. Within its walls, the government would later hold not only violent gang members and murderers but also suspected terrorists, high-risk spies, and internationally known figures. It soon earned a grim reputation as Britain's toughest prison, a label that remains even decades later. But to understand the birth of Belmarsh, we must look deeper into the psychology behind its creation. The early 90s marked a shift in how Britain viewed punishment and national security. The end of the Cold War had changed the global landscape, but a new kind of enemy was emerging, one without uniform or flag. Domestic terrorism, religious extremism, and transnational crime were rising, forcing the British justice system to evolve. Belmarsh became the physical embodiment of that evolution, a hybrid between a traditional prison and a counter-terror fortress. Inside Belmarsh, the environment was designed to break hierarchy. No prisoner, no matter how powerful, could control others or operate networks from within. The use of isolated cells, controlled movement, and monitored communication made it almost impossible for inmates to establish dominance. The staff themselves were rigorously trained, handpicked for discipline and psychological resilience. Many came from military or law enforcement backgrounds, understanding that this was not merely a prison posting, it was a national security assignment. Over the years, the name Belmarsh began to appear in news headlines, often linked to some of the most high-profile criminal and terrorism cases in British history. But in those early days, its creation symbolized something deeper: the transformation of Britain's prison philosophy from rehabilitation toward pure containment for those deemed beyond redemption. What set Belmarsh apart wasn't just its physical might, it was its psychological grip. Inmates who entered often described the experience as walking into a void, a place where time stood still and silence had weight. The air felt thick with tension, the corridors echoing with controlled quiet. Surveillance cameras were everywhere, recording every move. The hum of the security systems and the constant metallic click of locks created a soundscape of control. It wasn't simply a building, it was a machine built for total observation. Even the layout of Belmarsh was engineered to disorient. Its wings were symmetrical, each section resembling the next, creating a sense of endless repetition. It was easy for newcomers, even officers, to lose their bearings. This design stripped away individuality, forcing both inmates and staff into a uniform rhythm dictated entirely by the institution itself. Belmarsh's establishment also marked a turning point in the UK's political and legal landscape. It became the primary holding centre for suspects charged under anti-terror legislation, even before they were convicted. During the post-9/11 era, Belmarsh was used to detain foreign nationals suspected of terrorism under controversial laws allowing indefinite detention without trial. Civil rights groups protested, calling it the British Guantanamo Bay, while government officials defended it as a necessary measure for national safety. The tension between freedom and security, justice and control, was embedded into Belmarsh's DNA from the very first day. Its existence raised difficult questions. How far should a democracy go to protect itself? At what point does safety begin to look like suppression? HMP Belmarsh was not just born out of fear, it was born out of necessity. In a world growing increasingly unstable, Britain built itself a fortress, one that stands as both a symbol of protection and a shadow of its own moral struggle. Its creation was an admission that some individuals, some crimes, and some dangers cannot be reformed, only contained. And that is where the story of Belmarsh truly begins, in the tension between power and punishment, between justice and control, in the cold echoing halls of a prison designed not to heal, but to hold. From the outside, HMP Belmarsh doesn't look like a traditional prison. It looks like a fortress dropped in the middle of London's industrial outskirts. Massive grey walls rise against the skyline, lined with razor wire and patrolled by armed guards. There are no grand gates or welcoming signs. Only barriers, metal detectors, and security checkpoints that feel more like a military base than a correctional facility. Every inch of Belmarsh was designed with one purpose in mind: containment without compromise. This is not a place for hope or reform. It is a fortress engineered for control. When it was first built in 1991, its architects worked hand in hand with the Ministry of Justice and national security experts. The goal was not comfort or rehabilitation. It was impenetrability. The prison sits on 21 acres of land near the River Thames, its location chosen with strategic precision. Close enough to London's high-security courts, like the Old Bailey and Woolwich Crown Court, yet isolated enough to prevent easy escape or public interference. Its placement allows for direct prisoner transfers through secure underground routes and heavily armored vehicles. These transfers are military-grade operations in themselves, often involving convoys, armed escorts, and road closures. Once inside, Belmarsh's architecture speaks the language of fear and control. The high perimeter walls are 30 feet tall, topped with coils of razor wire and monitored by infrared motion sensors. Every gate is double-locked, every corridor sealed by electronic doors controlled from a central watchtower known as the hub. This control room is the brain of Belmarsh, a network of security feeds, alarms, and intercoms that track every movement within the prison. Nothing happens without authorization. Inside those walls, Belmarsh is divided into multiple wings, each designed for a specific type of prisoner. The High Security Unit HSU, known as the most restrictive section, holds men considered national security risks, terrorists, spies, and those involved in organized crime networks. Each cell here is a concrete box reinforced with steel, with unbreakable windows and no exposed wiring or fixtures that could be used as weapons. Inmates in the HSU are often confined for 23 hours a day. Their movements are scheduled down to the minute, and they rarely, if ever, come into direct contact with another human being. Beyond the HSU, other wings house Category A and B prisoners, dangerous offenders, violent gang leaders, and murderers who require constant supervision. The design of these blocks is built around maximum visibility, straight corridors with no blind spots, reinforced observation panels, and cameras at every corner. Officers patrol on elevated walkways, allowing them to see over cell doors and react instantly to disturbances. What makes Belmarsh's design even more formidable is its layered defense system. Security here operates in rings, like the layers of an onion. The first ring is the outer wall, designed to repel intrusion or escape. The second ring consists of internal fences and gates that divide the prison into separate zones. The third ring is psychological, the endless surveillance, the locked doors, the lack of privacy. Even when prisoners are alone in their cells, they know they are being watched. Belmarsh is not just a place of physical barriers, it is a place of mental ones. The technology within Belmarsh is as advanced as any military installation. Security cameras monitor not just common areas, but also the temperature, sound, and even vibrations within certain cells. Sensors can detect movement during nighttime lockdowns, and officers use biometric systems to control access to restricted areas. Every visitor, from lawyers to family members, must pass through metal detectors, hand scanners, and X-ray machines before being allowed entry. There is no such thing as a routine visit. Every second inside the fortress is monitored, recorded, and analyzed. Even the smallest design choices carry heavy psychological weight. The narrow hallways limit the number of people who can move side by side, reducing the chance of confrontation. The lighting is deliberately harsh and constant, eliminating shadows where weapons or contraband could be hidden. The air is cold and sterile, recycled and filtered to prevent the spread of disease or toxic substances. It's a place designed to strip away humanity one layer at a time. Belmarsh's exercise yards are unlike those of normal prisons. They are enclosed by concrete walls so high that inmates can't see the horizon. There is no view of the city, no sight of trees or life, only sky and stone. The yards are watched from elevated towers where guards, armed with non-lethal weapons and surveillance gear, can respond instantly to any sign of disorder. It's a reminder that even outside the cell there is no freedom, only controlled exposure. The interior layout of the prison functions on a system of containment and isolation. Each wing operates almost independently, limiting the spread of riots or collective resistance. In the rare event of an emergency, lockdown procedures can seal off entire sections of the prison within seconds. Gates shut automatically, alarms sound, and the control hub takes over. For inmates, there's nowhere to run. Even the staff facilities are built for endurance rather than comfort. Officers work long shifts in reinforced control booths, communicating through radio and intercom systems. Their uniforms carry panic alarms, and every movement they make is recorded by cameras, not for punishment but for protection. In Belmarsh, even those who enforce the law live under its shadow. Architecturally, Belmarsh was not just designed to house prisoners, it was designed to crush defiance. The structure itself becomes a form of discipline. There are no open communal areas, no easy paths of movement, and no opportunities for escape or rebellion. Its cold design serves as a constant reminder that the outside world, the world of freedom, light, and life, is far, far away. In essence, Belmarsh isn't simply a prison. It is a statement of power, a declaration that some walls are not meant to be climbed, and some doors are not meant to be opened. It was built to control not only the body but also the mind, to remind those within that the system's reach extends beyond bars and boundaries. Here, architecture becomes authority, and every brick, beam, and bolt whispers the same unyielding message. You are not in control, the fortress is. Every fortress has its legends, and HMP Belmarsh is no different. Behind its towering gray walls and iron gates lies a roster of names that have shaken Britain. Men whose crimes changed laws, fueled national fear, and made headlines across the world. This is not a place for petty thieves or small-time offenders. Belmarsh is reserved for those whose very presence poses a threat to society, men the state cannot afford to trust in ordinary prisons. The inmates who have passed through Belmarsh are a chilling mix of terrorists, killers, spies, and global figures, each carrying a story steeped in violence, ideology, or deception. Some are household names, others known only to intelligence services. Together, they form a tapestry of Britain's darkest chapters. Among the most infamous was Abu Hamza al-Masri, the radical cleric whose hook-shaped hands and fiery sermons made him one of the most recognized extremists in modern British history. Convicted of inciting murder and racial hatred, Hamza spent years inside Belmarsh before being extradited to the United States to face terrorism charges. He was housed in the High Security Unit, HSU, under constant surveillance, isolated from other inmates to prevent him from spreading his ideology. Guards described him as defiant, calm, and disturbingly persuasive, a man who could incite chaos with words alone. Another name that sent shockwaves through the public was Michael Adebalejo, one of the men convicted for the brutal murder of British soldier Lee Rigby in 2013. His attack, carried out in broad daylight on a London street, horrified the nation. In Belmarsh, Adebalejo became notorious for his aggressive behavior, frequently clashing with guards and other prisoners. His incarceration highlighted the growing challenge of extremism inside prisons, where ideology can spread as quickly as fear. But not all of Belmarsh's high-profile inmates were terrorists. Some came from the world of organized crime, the underworld kings whose empires were built on blood and fear. Figures like Curtis Warren, once Britain's most successful drug trafficker, known as Britain's Pablo Escobar, also spent time behind Belmarsh's bars. Men like him carried influence that extended beyond the prison walls, capable of ordering violence or manipulating criminal networks from within. Belmarsh's strict isolation policies and surveillance systems were designed largely to contain this kind of power. And then there are those whose names made global headlines. None more controversial than Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. When Assange was arrested in 2019, he was sent to Belmarsh, a decision that stunned the world. A publisher, not a terrorist or murderer, confined in Britain's harshest prison. He spent months there, isolated and under constant observation, awaiting extradition hearings. His case added a new layer to Belmarsh's legend, transforming it, in the eyes of many, into a political prison as well as a criminal one. The image of Assange, pale and disoriented, being escorted through Belmarsh's gates became a symbol of the fortress's unrelenting nature. Over the years, Belmarsh has also held spies, assassins and cult figures, including members of the IRA and men linked to international intelligence scandals. Its cells have witnessed confessions, breakdowns, and moments of eerie calm before the storm of court trials. The prison's corridors are lined with the ghosts of Britain's most feared, each name a story, each cell a secret. The diversity of its inmates has created a volatile environment. Extremists, crime bosses, and violent offenders all share space under one roof, a powder keg that requires constant vigilance. Prison officers undergo intense psychological training to handle manipulation, intimidation, and ideological persuasion. In Belmarsh, every conversation could be a trap, every glance a test of control. Guards speak of days when tension hangs so thick in the air that even silence feels dangerous. Inmates here are classified not just by the crimes they committed, but by the threat they pose, to others, to society, and to national security. Some are kept in solitary confinement for years, never seeing another prisoner. Others are allowed limited interaction under constant watch. Friendships, alliances, and rivalries form in whispers and glances through reinforced doors. Violence can erupt from nowhere. A single word, a single look can ignite chaos. What makes Belmarsh especially chilling is that within these walls, notoriety fades but danger doesn't. No matter how famous or infamous, each inmate is stripped of identity. They become numbers in a system that measures risk, not remorse. Even men who once commanded armies, orchestrated terror plots, or controlled millions in criminal revenue are reduced to silence behind steel and concrete. The fortress neutralizes power, that is its design and its purpose. Yet for all its control, Belmarsh remains a place where human psychology is tested to its limits. Inmates live under constant observation, cut off from family and the outside world. Some break quickly, others adapt, thriving within the structure, finding ways to manipulate routines, guards, or even the system itself. Power, even in its smallest form, becomes currency. Information becomes weaponry. And every prisoner, from the terrorist to the trafficker, learns that in Belmarsh, survival depends not on strength, but on control of the mind. There are countless unreported stories from within these walls: suicides, hunger strikes, violent outbursts, and eerie moments of calm between chaos. Prison staff describe nights where the air hums with tension. Doors rattle, shouts echo, and lights flicker under the constant hum of surveillance cameras. In those moments, Belmarsh feels less like a prison and more like a battleground of the human psyche, a place where ideology, crime, and insanity collide. Each name that enters Belmarsh adds another layer to its dark legend. From radicals who sought to destroy Britain, to those who sought to expose it, all end up behind the same steel doors, under the same unblinking cameras. Their stories differ, but their fate is the same: confinement in Britain's most secure fortress, a place where freedom is not just denied, it's forgotten. Life inside HMP Belmarsh is not measured in hours or days, it's measured in endurance. Time moves differently here. The air feels heavier, the silence sharper, and every sound, from the clang of metal doors to the echo of footsteps, reminds you that this is a world built on control. Inside these walls, freedom isn't just distant, it's erased. Belmarsh holds over 900 men, but it never feels crowded. Instead, it feels divided, segmented by concrete, routine, and fear. The structure of each day is a reflection of the prison's philosophy: discipline over comfort, control over compassion. Every moment is timed, every movement observed, every sound recorded. The day begins early, not with an alarm clock, but with the metallic thunder of doors unlocking across the wings. The first sound of the morning is a mechanical groan, the locks sliding open one by one, followed by guards' boots echoing through narrow corridors. Lights snap on suddenly, washing the cells in cold fluorescence. Inmates wake not to daylight but to artificial brightness and the realization that the day ahead will be exactly the same as the one before. Breakfast is delivered through narrow metal flaps, known as hatches. There's no conversation, only orders, brief exchanges, and the rattle of trays. The food is functional, not enjoyable: porridge, tea, and bread. It's fuel for another day of confinement, not comfort. After breakfast, inmates wait for the guard's call. Those allowed out of their cells are escorted in small groups, moving in single file along marked lines on the floor. Cameras track every step. In Belmarsh, time outside a cell is a privilege. For most inmates, especially those in the High Security Unit, HSU, it means 1 hour of exercise per day in an enclosed yard surrounded by concrete walls too tall to see over. There's no grass, no trees, no view of the city, only the sky above, framed like a picture no one can reach. Even this brief exposure is monitored by armed guards from above. The moment the hour ends, the doors slam shut and the silence returns. Inside the cells, life slows to a crawl. Each one measures roughly 12 feet by 8 feet, with a bed, toilet, sink, and small desk. The walls are bare, the air still. There's no privacy, only containment. Some inmates read to pass the time, others write letters or pace endlessly across the same few steps. Radios and televisions are privileges earned through good behavior, but even those offer limited escape. For those in solitary confinement, silence becomes the loudest sound of all. Communication between prisoners is heavily restricted. Voices travel through vents, taps echo along pipes. Messages are whispered in code, smuggled in notes, or sent through glances in the brief seconds during transfers. For the guards, breaking these chains of communication is a daily battle. For the prisoners, maintaining them is survival. Violence is a constant threat, always bubbling beneath the surface. In a place filled with murderers, extremists, and gang leaders, tension can erupt without warning. A single look, a single insult, or even a rumor can ignite chaos. Fights break out in corridors and exercise yards, even in isolation wings. The staff's response is swift and calculated. Lockdown procedures activate instantly, alarms blare, and entire blocks can be sealed within seconds. Despite the risk, many inmates crave confrontation because it's one of the few moments that reminds them they're still alive. The monotony of Belmarsh dulls the senses. Days blur into weeks, weeks into months. For some, the silence becomes unbearable. Mental health deterioration is common. Depression, paranoia, and rage are as much a part of life here as the air itself. The prison's psychiatric unit is always full, yet help feels distant. For those in solitary, mental strain turns into hallucination. Some talk to the walls. Others forget the sound of their own voice. Guards face their own psychological battles. Every officer who walks into Belmarsh knows the risks, not just of violence but of mental exhaustion. They operate under constant tension, navigating between control and compassion. Many speak of the Belmarsh stare, a hardened look that develops after years of exposure to fear and manipulation. For them, the job is a test of endurance as much as duty. Yet even within this fortress, moments of humanity still flicker. A shared joke between inmates, a guard's brief word of kindness, or a letter from home can break the monotony for a second. Family visits are allowed, but they're far from personal. Visitors pass through multiple checkpoints, scanners, and interrogations before reaching a glass partition. Conversations happen through telephones, eyes separated by reinforced panels. Children see their fathers through glass, their voices echoing in rooms filled with cameras. It's not reunion, it's reminder. In the workshops and educational units, some inmates try to rebuild fragments of normality. They learn trades, read books, or attend therapy sessions. For a few, it's a step toward rehabilitation. For most, it's simply structure, something to occupy the endless time. The prison library holds books on every subject imaginable, yet even knowledge feels heavy when it's trapped behind bars. When night falls, the rhythm doesn't stop, it only changes. The sound of locks echoes again as doors seal shut for the night. The hum of fluorescent lights fills the corridors. Some inmates lie awake, staring at the ceiling, counting seconds. Others drift into uneasy sleep, haunted by the memories of what brought them here, or the fear of what tomorrow might bring. Guards make their rounds, peering through cell windows, noting every movement. In Belmarsh, the night is not peaceful, it's watchful. Somewhere a prisoner shouts. Somewhere else metal clanks. The silence after each noise feels heavier than the noise itself. Life here is not just punishment, it's erosion, of will, of time, of identity. Inmates who survive Belmarsh rarely leave unchanged. They carry the weight of its silence, the memory of its walls, and the echo of its locks long after they're free. Belmarsh doesn't just imprison bodies. It imprisons time itself. Each day begins the same and ends the same, blending into a rhythm that has no future and no past, only the relentless now. Inside these walls, survival isn't about strength. It's about endurance, patience, and the ability to keep one's sanity in a place where even thoughts feel caged. If Belmarsh is a fortress, then its high-security unit, the HSU, is the fortress within the fortress. This is the place where Britain hides its most dangerous men, the ones deemed too radical, too violent, or too influential to mix with anyone else. To the outside world, the HSU is a rumor. To those inside, it's a reality that blurs the line between punishment and psychological warfare. Tucked deep within the prison's inner compound, the HSU is invisible to outsiders. You won't find it on maps, and even most Belmarsh staff never step inside. Only a select group of specially cleared officers, vetted by National Security Services, are permitted access. They operate under strict orders, bound by secrecy. What happens in the HSU rarely leaves it. The wing was originally created during the rise of domestic terrorism and organized crime in the 1990s, a time when Britain faced threats that demanded absolute control. Over the decades, it evolved into something far more extreme, a containment zone for the state's most dangerous minds. The men kept here are not just murderers or gangsters. Many are terrorists, radical preachers, or ideological leaders capable of influencing others with a single word. In the HSU, words themselves are considered weapons. Each inmate in the terror wing is treated as a potential national security threat. The cells are not just rooms, they are engineered isolation chambers. Constructed from reinforced concrete, lined with steel mesh, and fitted with unbreakable glass, every surface is designed to resist tampering, concealment, or destruction. There are no sharp edges, no loose fittings, no shadows. Even the air vents are narrow and reinforced. The temperature, lighting, and airflow are monitored from a control center outside the wing. Everything and everyone is under surveillance. The men here live in near total solitude. They do not share corridors, meals, or recreation time. Doors open remotely, and movements are timed to ensure no two inmates ever cross paths. Even the guards wear body cameras and panic alarms, connected directly to command posts through encrypted communication systems. Every exchange, every gesture is logged. For prisoners in the HSU, time is their only companion, and even time feels like an enemy. Days are carved into fragments of routine. Wake up, eat, exercise, shower, sleep. Each activity is scheduled to the minute, leaving no room for deviation. Exercise takes place alone in what inmates call the cage, a concrete courtyard surrounded by 20-foot walls and covered by wire mesh. There's no view beyond gray concrete and a slice of sky. Some compare it to an open-air coffin. Conversation is nearly impossible. Inmates are not allowed direct contact with others. When communication is permitted, for example during legal consultations, it occurs behind soundproof glass panels under camera watch with guards stationed nearby. Even mail is scanned, copied, and reviewed before being delivered. Religious texts are checked page by page. There are no newspapers, no internet, no fresh information from the outside world. The goal is simple: to disconnect, disarm, and deprogram. The psychological toll of such isolation is immense. Many prisoners in the terror wing develop symptoms of sensory deprivation, paranoia, hallucinations, memory loss, or a fading sense of time. One former officer described it as a place where even silence screams. Another said, "You can feel the fear in the air. It doesn't leave you, it lives with you." Yet despite its darkness, the HSU is considered one of the safest places in Britain. It has never had a successful escape, riot, or coordinated attack since its creation. That perfection is by design. Multiple sealed corridors, reinforced blast doors, and overlapping security rings make escape physically impossible. The wing can be shut down in under 30 seconds with a single command from the control room. Once sealed, no one gets in or out without high-level authorization. Inside there are no traditional prison sounds, no shouting, no clanging gates, no communal noise. The silence is absolute, designed to suppress communication and maintain psychological pressure. Even guards are instructed to minimize speech, reducing verbal interaction to essential commands only. In this world, control isn't just physical, it's mental. But not all who work in the terror wing are immune to its effects. Officers describe long shifts in an environment that feels timeless and airless. The absence of noise, color, and sunlight begins to weigh on them, creating a sense of detachment. Many rotate out after a few months to avoid burnout or emotional breakdown. Working here requires a kind of psychological armor, one that not everyone can maintain. Among the infamous names who have passed through the HSU are Abu Hamza al-Masri, Abu Qatada, and several key figures from Al-Qaeda and ISIS-related investigations. Each one monitored under protocols designed by both MI5 and the Ministry of Justice. Their cells are equipped with sensors that track breathing, heart rate, and movement, technology more common in intelligence facilities than prisons. In the rare event of an emergency, such as a health crisis or violent episode, specialized teams respond. Known as control and restraint units, they operate with military precision, wearing armor, helmets, and carrying non-lethal equipment. Their drills are rehearsed weekly. They can enter, subdue, and extract an inmate in less than 90 seconds. The entire process is recorded from multiple angles for review. The HSU operates almost as its own microstate, a place where law, psychology, and intelligence intersect. Some describe it as the dark heart of Belmarsh, a cold, silent engine that keeps the rest of the prison in balance. Without it, the outer wings would be far more volatile. Within it, order is absolute, but at the cost of humanity. Critics argue that the terror wing blurs the line between imprisonment and torture. Human rights groups have called its conditions psychological punishment, rather than correctional control. Supporters, however, see it as essential, the price of protecting the public from men who can inspire death with a single message or command. Inside these walls, there are no second chances, no rehabilitation programs, no meaningful interaction. There is only silence, surveillance, and solitude. The HSU doesn't just imprison the dangerous, it erases influence. It isolates the voice, the ideology, and the power that once made these men a threat. And in doing so, it stands as the most extreme embodiment of Britain's will to contain what it cannot destroy. Concrete walls and endless steel corridors of HMP Belmarsh lies a far more complex battle. Not one of bars and chains, but of ethics, law, and human dignity. For decades, Belmarsh has stood as a symbol of Britain's unflinching resolve against crime and terrorism. Yet, beneath that image of control and discipline, controversy brews, a shadowed argument between justice and humanity, security and compassion. Belmarsh is often described as Britain's Guantanamo Bay. It's a comparison the government resents, yet it persists, whispered by human rights advocates, repeated by journalists, and murmured by families of inmates who vanish behind those towering gates. Why? Because Belmarsh is more than a prison. It is a place where Britain's toughest laws meet the limits of moral endurance. Inside its walls, conditions are stark, unyielding, and meticulously controlled. But critics say that control often crosses into cruelty. Reports from former prisoners, lawyers, and human rights organizations have painted a grim picture of life in Belmarsh. Long-term isolation, limited mental health support, and the slow erosion of the human spirit. For inmates housed in the high-security unit, the so-called terror wing, isolation can stretch for years. 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, 1 hour of exercise in a concrete box, and minimal contact with the outside world. To some, this is justice. To others, it is psychological warfare disguised as security. Amnesty International and the Howard League for Penal Reform have repeatedly raised alarms. Their investigations describe the HSU as an environment of extreme sensory deprivation, one that may violate international standards of humane treatment. They warn that the prison's methods, while effective in containing threats, may also create new ones, in the minds and hearts of the men it breaks. One former inmate described his experience with haunting simplicity. In Belmarsh, you don't count days, you count the sounds that break the silence. He spoke of flickering lights that never turned off, of guards who avoided eye contact, of feeling forgotten by the world. And yet, Belmarsh's administration defends its practices fiercely. Officials insist that every measure is necessary, every decision rooted in safety. They point to the caliber of prisoners held there, terrorists, organized crime leaders, men who have threatened lives on a national scale. To them, Belmarsh isn't cruel, it's cautious. The truth lies somewhere in between, in the space where fear and necessity collide. Over the years, Belmarsh has also been at the heart of several high-profile cases that thrust it into the media spotlight, and with it, intense public scrutiny. The most notable is perhaps Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks founder, who was held here while fighting extradition to the United States. His supporters called it political imprisonment, claiming that Belmarsh's conditions were designed to break his spirit rather than simply detain him. Footage from court appearances showed a pale, visibly exhausted Assange, an image that reignited debates about how Belmarsh treats those who have not yet been convicted of violent crimes. Another example came from mental health investigations inside the prison. Independent inspectors have reported alarming rates of depression, self-harm, and suicide attempts. The 2023 inspection by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Prisons found that some inmates had not seen sunlight for weeks. Overcrowding, understaffing, and pandemic restrictions only worsened these conditions, transforming the facility into what one report called a pressure cooker of despair. Even guards, some speaking anonymously, have described emotional strain and burnout. One officer admitted, "It's not just the prisoners who break in Belmarsh, it's us too. The walls don't let anyone out untouched." Ladies and gentlemen, when the heavy steel gates of HMP Belmarsh finally open and an inmate steps into the outside world, you might imagine that moment as freedom, the end of suffering, the return to life. But for many who have survived Britain's toughest prison, that first breath of free air is not liberation. It's confusion. It's fear. It's silence louder than anything they ever heard behind bars. Because the truth is this, no one truly leaves Belmarsh the same. The experience of living under total surveillance, isolation, and psychological strain rewires the human mind. For years, every movement, every breath, every word is controlled. The walls dictate when you wake, when you sleep, when you see light. The very concept of choice disappears. And then one morning that control is gone. The door opens. You are free. But freedom after Belmarsh feels like stepping off a cliff. Former inmates often describe the outside world as too bright, too loud, too alive. The chaos of ordinary life, cars, crowds, voices, overwhelms them. One man released after 9 years said, "When I got out, I stood still on the pavement for 10 minutes. I didn't know how to move. No one was telling me what to do anymore." For those who serve time in the high-security unit, re-entry is even more brutal. They have spent years in near total isolation. No conversation, no social contact, no human warmth. They step into a world that has changed beyond recognition. Technology, fashion, language, everything feels alien. Family members they once knew have grown distant or moved on. Children have become adults. The world they left behind has moved forward, but they are stuck in time. The psychological effects are devastating. Many ex-inmates suffer from institutionalization, a condition where the routines and restrictions of prison become ingrained into the mind. They wake at the same hour, pace their rooms in silence, fold clothes with mechanical precision. Some can't sleep without the hum of fluorescent lights or the clang of metal doors. Others struggle with paranoia, a feeling that they're still being watched. Even outside, they scan crowds for guards that aren't there. Mental health experts who've studied Belmarsh survivors compare their symptoms to post-traumatic stress disorder. Years of isolation and hyper-control create deep psychological scars. Anxiety, depression, emotional detachment. And yet, for many, the hardest part isn't what they endured inside. It's the fact that no one outside understands it. Society is rarely forgiving. The label ex-Belmarsh inmate follows them everywhere. A silent brand that shapes how employers, neighbors, and even families see them. It doesn't matter if they were cleared of charges or served their sentence honorably. Once you've been in Belmarsh, the world assumes the worst. Some former prisoners describe it as a second prison without walls, a life sentence of suspicion. For those convicted of terrorism-related offenses, the monitoring never truly ends. They are placed under strict license conditions, required to check in with probation officers, attend de-radicalization programs, and live under curfews or electronic tags. Their phone calls may be recorded, their movements tracked. In some cases, MI5 or counterterrorism police maintain quiet surveillance even years after release. Freedom, in this sense, is conditional, a leash long enough to walk but never to run. Others, particularly those once involved in organized crime or high-profile cases, face threats from rival groups or media exposure. Some must relocate under new identities. A few end up back in custody within months, not because they want to return but because the outside world feels unbearable. One ex-officer said, "Belmarsh doesn't just punish men, it reprograms them. And once they leave, most never learn how to live normally again." But not all stories end in darkness. There are rare cases of redemption, men who find purpose after surviving Britain's most notorious prison. Some become advocates for prison reform, using their experiences to speak about mental health and rehabilitation. Others dedicate themselves to religion, family, or community service, seeking to atone for their pasts. They describe survival in Belmarsh as a test of spirit, one that strips everything away until only truth remains. Still, for every man who finds redemption, many more drift into isolation or addiction. With limited job prospects and constant stigma, they fall through the cracks of society. Some end up homeless, others reoffend, not for gain but because prison feels safer than freedom. Inside, life was harsh but predictable. Outside, it's chaos. As one former inmate said, Belmarsh breaks you in ways you don't see until you're free. It teaches you to survive a world that no longer exists once you're out. There's also the matter of family reunification. Many former prisoners struggle to reconnect with loved ones who endured years of absence, shame, and fear. Children grow wary of fathers they barely know. Wives and parents tread carefully around men who return with eyes that seem older, colder. The emotional distance created by prison walls doesn't vanish when those walls disappear. In some cases, it deepens. Rehabilitation programs attempt to bridge this gap, but they face enormous challenges. The trauma of Belmarsh cannot be undone by a few counseling sessions or probation check-ins. To truly reintegrate, an individual must relearn the concept of trust. Trust in others and perhaps more importantly, trust in themselves. And yet, amid this bleak landscape, there's one truth that echoes through every story. Belmarsh doesn't simply confine men, it transforms them. Some emerge shattered, others awakened. Some lose faith in humanity, others discover it anew. But no one, not a single man, walks away unchanged. When the gates of HMP Belmarsh close behind them for the last time, they step into a world that feels both foreign and familiar, carrying invisible chains that time alone cannot break. Freedom is supposed to be the end of the sentence, but for many who have survived Britain's toughest prison, it's only the beginning of another kind of confinement.